Welcome to Culture at Work, the podcast that explores how to maintain a strong corporate culture in a rapidly changing world. I'm your host, Tim Carroll, inviting you to learn from industry leaders on how to build an exciting culture to bring people back to the office and inspire them like never before. On today's episode, we have Michelle Boolton. Michelle is a strategic sales executive with deep expertise in design and market engagement, currently serving as the Vice President of A&D at Kimball International. In this role, Michelle leads high-impact initiatives focused on driving long-term growth, increasing market penetration, and enhancing brand identity. Michelle holds an MBA in marketing from the University of Cincinnati and a BFA in interior design, giving her a unique ability to bridge design thinking with strategic sales execution. Her leadership roles include serving on the boards of the International Interior Design Association and the International Design Continuing Education Council, reflecting her dedication to advancing both the sales and design communities. Michelle has a unique ability to bridge the gap between design and business, and this is going to be a great conversation. Let's get to it. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today. This is a really, really interesting topic in how does design impact culture and what's happening in the world of design. And you have a very unique perspective, being able to go around the country. And I wanted to really start just there. Tell us a little bit about what it's like and what do you do as the VP of A&D for Kimball
Hi.
International?
Well, thanks, Tim, for having me on. What an honor this is. My role here at Kimball International, it's VP of A&D. What that really means is I get to help really bring the power of design forward to the country, right? So my role is, yes, it's A&D strategy. I absolutely have a team that, connects directly with our A&D partners, but I also bring design forward through our design strategists, through our e-tools, through our showroom experiences. And what I love about the role in particular is that all of those things, there's so many little micro moments and so many little intangibles that sometimes you can't put your finger on the power of, but they're all centered around design. And I've always said design is humankind's problem solver, and that's what it is. My team and I are constantly solving problems for our end users, our dealer partners like yourself, and the design community, kind of through those four different channels of showrooms, A&D, e-tools, and dealer designers.
So with that perspective, and again, I really like this conversation because you go all over the country. You are talking to design firms, architect and design firms, as well as dealers and clients, but architect and design firms all around the country, which provides different, I mean, there are differences around the country, right? In different areas.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and we'll get to that. But what I want to start here with the question we ask everybody, which is how do you, with that perspective, how do you define culture?
Mm. Culture is, I believe, the heartbeat of fill in the blank, right? So in this case, we are talking about work and workplace, and that's kind of the industry that we thrive in. So it's the heartbeat of an organization. But truthfully, I believe it's the heartbeat of. I think a family has a culture, right? My
That's right.
family absolutely has a culture. Like culture is so ingrained to everybody wants to belong. Belonging and culture are kind of two sides of the same coin. As humans, we want to belong. It's this innate desire that we all have. So really, culture is the heartbeat of an organization. I'll start with that. I think it's this, sometimes it's invisible yet undeniable in so many ways. It's this force that shapes kind of everything we do. From a work perspective, I think it shows up in our values. It shows up in the way that we treat our people. It shows up in the spaces that we provide our customers and our employees and our members to really, thrive within. Um, I think it's an important part of being human that we are all kind of connected through this shared sense of belonging.
So belonging,
Mm,
let's let's get to that.
mhm,
Kimball International, there is this idea of creating places to belong. Can you speak a little bit to how important that is and how we can do that in the design community?
Oh yeah. The interesting part about that is, yes, so we have this entire initiative that is, you know, creating places to belong. It's on our website. We have tools around it. But how it started was an internal thing, right? Through the pandemic, we recognized number one, we have always felt that our culture is special at Kimball International. And the thing about culture that you have to remember is you always must nurture it, right? Like you have to keep feeding it. You have to be aware of it. You can't ever just take it for granted. And so during the pandemic, we recognized that with us not all together as often, we might lose sight of that. So we really created an initiative to create places to belong, to be very thoughtful about how our people are coming together. When we brought people back to the office, we thought about what does that need to feel like? What does that need to look like? How do we ensure that, folks feel comfortable? So it started as this internal measure. And so then we started like asking clients, partners like yourself. I remember being in Dallas and asking the question, what does belonging mean to you? That simple question. And you could see people's faces immediately light up, right? Like belonging is this powerful word. And people would say things like to be seen, to feel connected, to have a voice, to I'm just thinking of some of the things. And in reality, like we started seeing the same theme, and then we started realizing like this is important. We need to do research on it. We need to share it. So that sort of initial internal mantra has now led to this initiative that we have, which is being champions of belonging, of sharing. We've done quite a bit of research with some very, very, very smart people from Oxford, from Stanford, who helped us really sort of get to the business metrics of why this matters, right? Because at the end of the day, business leaders want to understand how an investment in space or in culture yields an impact to their business, right? So we did some research on that, and then we came out, which the thing that I'm most excited about is a tool set that is very it's simple yet impactful, right? It is a quiz that allows a company to understand what culture type they are. And then we really helped build the tool set that once you know your culture, then you can start to look at, well, what are the human needs? What are the sensory elements that I'm going to need? What are the business priorities? What are the space types? And so it's really been this great rally cry that the company has had that we're sharing with end users, dealer partners, and the design community. And all of them are like, this is a great tool to help us champion this conversation.
There's a statistic out there that says the number one reason people stay where they are, and as opposed to just going off and chasing the almighty dollar, I mean, it's not money, it's their friends work there.
Hmm.
I mean, that's another way to
Community.
say that it's belonging, right?
It is. Yeah.
And it means so much, and to a degree that I'm not certain every employee can define it, that it's
Yeah.
belonging. And I think the good companies are really starting to see that. People like Amazon, they've just recently announced, not to date this, but they just recently announced they're coming back to the office 5 days a week,
Hmm.
in the beginning of next year. And I think they're going to lead the charge
Hmm.
because that matters. It just matters, to give somebody and give people that anchor, which culture is really the space, and the culture are the anchor that keep people where they are and tied to, um, the purpose that your company has put out there, right? I mean, are you
Yeah.
seeing that conversation more?
Yeah, this topic in particular, to your point earlier, I'm lucky, right? I feel very humble and very thankful that I do have a position that I can see what's happening at a very high level across the industry and across the US, right? And depending on where you are, some people would say, I challenge every word you said. Yes, culture is very important, but it doesn't need to be defined by space. right? Like there are companies that are 100% remote that probably would, you know, go to a toe-to-toe match with you on, do we
I
really
would
need to
welcome
have
it.
space
I
to
would
have the
welcome that
culture,
toe-to-toe match.
right? I
Absolutely.
know.
Because at
I
the end of the day,
personally,
look, at the end of the day, I'm not to get on a soapbox on this, but at the end of the day, space matters. Culture is not to bore, but I have done a lot of research on building and maintaining culture in a virtual world in my earlier life in grad studies. And that is one of those things that can you maintain it? It's difficult. You better be very intentional about it. Can you create it? No. And you're having to create it every time you hire somebody new. You're having to lead them into what that culture is, and that's really difficult. And I find a lot of people are burying their heads in the sand by saying that they do better work. And there are some that can. There are some industries that can. But for the most part, I believe people need to come back in order to do the best work and be efficient, be effective,
yeah.
collaborate, innovate. All of that stuff is lost. We tried this for years before the pandemic, and people tried it and came back. I worked for a company that did and sent everybody back to the
Yeah.
office. And I think that some of these CEOs are going to lose their job over it once their profits start dropping.
Well, I feel like, like I said, I brought it up because, I find myself in these conversations where there's strong point of view all the time, right? And as designers, I'm a designer, and as a designer, first of all, you have to be a great listener, and you really have to like try to get to the point, like what is driving some of these perspectives, right? My personal belief is that space, it's this kind of goes back to the, culture is this invisible yet undeniable factor that in a space, why I love space, we maybe we can go into this part, but why I love space in particular is that is you can read, my opinion, you can read the culture of an organization without saying a word when you
Yeah,
walk into a space,
that's
right?
right.
It's that powerful. And so it helps, I love your word, it helps anchor an organization when there is a space that reflects the culture. It is this silent steward of the mission and the values and the heartbeat and soul of a company when you walk in the door, right? It's the thing I love that people come sometimes to, like, I call it our home, right, in Jasper, Indiana. And the most complimentary thing someone can say to me is, God, I wish I could work here. All because they walked in and felt the vibe. You know what I mean? Like, that's pretty powerful of how space and culture are so married together, and why, when they're right, they're so powerful.
There's a stat out there as well that says a prospective employee or a prospective client will make up their mind within 5 seconds of walking in the door, whether they want to work for or with you. And the story you're telling is a very powerful story right off the bat. I remember many, 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 many years ago, I was interviewing for a job and I walked in the door and I knew immediately this was not the place for me. Like it was sad.
Give
It
you
was
the
a sad
heebie-jeebies.
space. Yeah, very much
Yeah.
so. It was a
Yeah.
very creepy, sad place. So you just know, right?
Oh, yeah.
Things can change throughout the conversation, good or bad, after that, but they are going to have an initial reaction to that walking in the door.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I think through the pandemic, I'm not an advocate that says that the pandemic was a good thing. However, I do think that there are some factors that push the ball forward. And
Right.
one of them is the power of good design, right? So, good design is what you feel when, again, back to these intangibles. I can remember when I spent 13 years at a dealer, and I can remember walking into spaces and being like, oh my gosh, I am glad I'm here to help you, right? Because this is not going to help you attract and retain talent.
Right.
And candidly, some really didn't, some leaders did not care. It was back of the house. They didn't seem to really put a lot of value in the way that they showed up to the external world. Well, fast forward, the office now is this currency, and good design is the thing that's really driving but where people spend employee money, basically, like where I'm going to come and work. And it has pushed forward the value of good design in ways that I don't know if we would have gotten here as quickly had it not been for the pandemic and everybody going home, and now the office is the place that is wooing people to come back. right? Nobody wants to be mandated to do anything, but boy, let me have this gorgeous, amenity rich, intentional, alive cultural space for you to come back to.
And shame on us as a country and as a just human beings if we don't get something good out of that horrible situation, right? And that we don't bring something out of that that's going to help drive some innovation and everything. So, but you mentioned attracting and retaining, and I've read a number of annual reports over the years. There's a section in there in every annual report that's called risk factors.
Mm-hmm.
And in those risk factors, it's the chief executive's job to say, hey, everything in here we believe is going to happen unless these things, we can't get control over these things. Almost every one of them, I'm not going to say every one, but almost every one of them says that I've read say attracting and retaining quality talent is a risk factor. We have to be able to do that. How are we able to do that with design?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to some of the research that we did on this creating places to belong. As an example, when people feel that they belong, there is a 50% reduction in turnover risk. So exactly that, right? There is a 75% reduction in sick days. There's a 56% improvement in job performance, all because people feel that they belong. Design is what unlocks that feeling, right? When you walk into the space, and again, it is a space that you just feel good in. It's hard to put a pinpoint what it is. Is it the access to natural light? Is it the sensory environments? Is it the multiple textures that we need to sort of like stimulate our brain? Is it the furniture, which is the unsung hero of any space, right? It's the actual
Yep.
thing you use, and yet is the thing that's often taken for granted. But all of those things coupled together are what unlocks this feeling of belonging and this just feeling good, right? Again, it's really hard to pinpoint. Here's the thing, when it's not there. Sometimes
Mm.
it's hard to pinpoint what it is that is making you feel good, but boy, you can walk into a space, to your point earlier, and know within 5 seconds, this isn't my kind of jam.
Yep. Get out
Get
fast.
out.
So let's change course just a little bit. And I'd like to get some of your insights on the challenges facing the design community today. And again, your perspective, you're out there with a lot of different designers all over the country. So what are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges the design community is facing today?
Yeah, I think there's three things come to mind. Number one, the complexity level of our industry has only been magnified in recent years, in my opinion.
Yes.
We have this constantly evolving influence. So there are, new players in any given deal. There's timelines being extended. There's this ongoing office transformation, depending on where you are, particularly geographically focused. Some places, it's still pretty, nobody's back to work, where there's
Right.
other places that they kind of never left, right? And so there you have those major swings from the return to work pendulum. There's, like I mentioned, this lengthened decision making timeline. Everything's just taking longer. And I hear that from the designers too. I mean, we feel it on our side, and I know you feel it. But, I was talking to a group of designers, and they were saying that, this is always something that sometimes I feel like gets forgotten, but the design community has to sell their services too, right? They have business development, they have pitch decks, they have all the things, they have to do an
Right.
RFP that often gets forgotten. And so, but when I'm talking to them about that and how, what that looks like, and that complexity and that decision making timeline and the number of people that they need to influence is no different than how that's changed for us, right? So theirs is just earlier in the process than most times what we are, right? So there's that complexity. There's this desire. I've been in this industry for 20 plus years. And I've seen the pendulum of desire for flexibility swung all sorts of ways, right? And we are back to a time when people want walls to be rubber, everything to be on casters, nothing to have a wire attached. And that's very hard to design for, right? It's great theoretically, it's very hard to physically make that work. right? There's still lots of wires everywhere. Walls, last I checked, are not rubber, right? You can't, it's just tough to sometimes design within those constraints. And then I think there's a lot of market influence shifts, right? So right now, of course, the election always slows things down, causes people to sit back and just wait for a minute. And I think there's just less large projects out there to be had. So it's more competitive for the design community and like us. So that's kind of one bucket that I see on some of the complexities from a design standpoint. I think some of the others are finding talent. It is not hard. I mean, it's not easy to find design talent. And then it's how do you nurture this generation of designers and make sure that they are getting, coached and mentored in the way that they want to be coached and mentored. And maybe third, and then I'll zip it for a minute, is I think that I think AI, and I know this is the topic that you love as well, but I think I'm bullish on AI. I think it is going to allow access to more. I think design historically has been coveted by the haves. It's not been accessible to the have nots. So I'm hopeful that AI allows design to be spread farther and wider. And I'm hopeful that it is a tool like the calculator is to the mathematician. To me, it is something that is, oh, design is human. There's no way that AI is going to get it right all on its own. I do not believe that. But boy, it can help us get further faster when we embrace it, in my opinion.
I like that idea of the calculator to the mathematician. I agree. I think AI is going to be able to free up the design community to do more of what they love to do and less of what they don't like to do.
It's
I
a great
think
point.
it's going to be allow them to get some of further down the road faster and get to the good stuff, get to the creative stuff. I really do. And to that creative class conversation and nurturing that. I mean, I know at Working Spaces we believe very much in nurturing that creative class. Creativity is one of our core values, and we do many things throughout the year just specifically to nurture that creative class. And I highly encourage others to do the same because just expecting them to just go and not feeding that passion and that inspiration and finding ways to help with that inspiration, it's a lose game if you just are expecting them just go create and not
Mhm.
take some time to feed that. So, one of the other things I'm wondering, I don't know this, I'm not a designer. As far as challenges, my thought goes to, obviously it's a great thing and it's not sometimes, but the internet
Mhm.
can be a challenge. I think we're getting into the process later with our clients. I think our clients are doing their own research, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Oh,
Or
big
as much
time.
as they think they are. And I think they may think they're further down the line than they really are. And HGTV has made everybody think you can renovate a house with a $10,000 budget. I mean, do you find that to be the case as well? Do you see it?
Oh, yeah.
Any of that conversation happening within the
Oh,
design community
yeah.
that you
Yeah.
speak to?
I mean, what that's a lot to unpack on that one. I think the design community, let's just start with the end users. The end user is more informed now than any other time, right? There's just access to
Right.
Pinterest and access to, office images. I mean, there's just access in general. And the office, I mean, for a while there, you couldn't open up LinkedIn or Forbes or anything and read about something around the office and its importance, right? So it's been headlined into people's faces to pay attention to how your office can work for you or not. And so, like, there's just more interest and more access, which leads to enter, the designer who has to now shape that person's perspective that they've come in the door with, right? Sometimes that perspective is, I mean, there's always going to be nuggets of value, but sometimes make me look like her, like it doesn't work. You're not that company. Your DNA does not match this Pinterest board that you have found for yourself. There's a disconnect in culture, actually. A lot of times, the sort of, I always think of the stylist who you walk in and you say, make me look like her, and yet you have the totally different hair type. It's very, very similar, right? The designer has to try to mold and shape this person's perception, this end user's perception of what they want, and marry that up with what the realities are that they can do and what their culture, will sort of like withstand. plus then budget, plus then time constraints, plus then, all these other factors. The interesting thing that I'm noticing, kind of wrapping what I was saying earlier with some of the challenges, is some of the new design, the emerging talent also has access to all of these things. And there was a time, particularly during the sort of meat of the pandemic, where these young emerging designers were not getting the mentorship from their leaders nor from the industry, meaning the manufacturers or the dealers. And there was a firm that shared a story that their designer, this young designer, was specifying a height adjustable workstation or something that they saw online at something.com. And they have this principal, right, design principal, happened to be walking by and was like, what is that? And they were like, oh, well, it's this workstation height adjustable desk thing. And they were like, well, who's the manufacturer? Right. And that story led to us starting Upstar, which is our forum for emerging talent, to try to help shape and nurture and coach and mentor these young designers to ensure that they understand, not that it's very interesting because you don't want to be like, hey, you're wrong, don't do that, because that doesn't get you anywhere. That's not productive when you coach, right? But what is productive is just exposure to the value of having BIFMA rated quality products, the value of having partners that can help service day two. These are
Right.
the things that they were not getting during that time. They had too much access to internet without sort of understanding the ramifications of choosing product that would never withstand the use of a commercial space, right? And so kind of marrying some of those things together is, I don't mean to toot our horn on Upstar, but it is what started it. And now we're like, I don't know, we have maybe 75 members across the US in that program, but it's tough. HGTV is a reality, but it truly does impact everyone in our industry
Right.
because it sets the expectation at a bar that's not realistic.
We're going to break away for just a quick message, and we'll be right back after this. At Working Spaces, we do much more than just sell furniture. We immerse ourselves in the culture of each and every client, and then create spaces that inspire creativity, inspire productivity, and inspire connectivity. So if you're looking to create an office space that inspires your employees to want to come back to the office, collaborate face-to-face, and do their best work every day, contact Working Spaces. Working Spaces, the innovative leader in office furniture and design since 1999. Now in 6 markets nationwide. Welcome back to Culture at Work. So you touched on partnership, and I'd love to just dig in just a little bit there on the importance of the relationship between manufacturer, the dealer, the A&D firm, the importance of that and how that best works.
Yeah, it's the proverbial three-legged stool of greatness. When it's done right, it is so exciting, and it can be such a, in this industry, we love to have fun, and there's nothing more fun than when your dealer partner, the manufacturer, and the design firm are all aligned to the same mission, see the value in one another, give each other space and grace to bring their perspective to the table, all on behalf of this end user that we're trying to unlock belonging for, right? Like that's a lot of fun when you get to do that. The
No
other
doubt.
side of that coin is that sometimes that doesn't happen as often as
Yeah.
we would all like it to, right? But it
That's
can
right.
happen. And so I'm an optimist and I enter every new opportunity thinking that that's the way it's going to go.
I will tell you one, we just got in a beautiful case study on Rawlings in St. Louis. They make gloves and bats for baseball and softball. And that is one between Kimball and Oculus, which was the design firm on this, and Working Spaces, where that all worked in concert in unison together, where it is, you can definitely see it in the final product. It's a
Mhm.
beautiful, beautiful space. And they went through the process to try to figure out kind of their culture, who they want to be in the new space. And you can tell a difference, right? I think that that goes to what you were saying before and creating those places to belong. You've got to do the work, really. And you're not really going to get that much just searching the internet and seeing what you like. You really want to have that partner that's done this before, that can walk down the path with you, right? Don't you
Yeah.
find that
Oh,
that
yeah.
experience is going to help?
I think what we do, we as in the collective tripod of, three-legged stool of, use the dealer, manufacturer, and design firm, is we're translators, right? We translate these desires from our end users
I like that.
into a physical representation of what those desires were. And I think that, to your point, you have to do the work. That the design firm in many cases is the one kind of laying that out to the end user, like, hey, these are the things that we need to get from you. You've got skin in the game too. And the best design firms are those that can have their end users understand their part in the process, right? The end user has a part in they have a responsibility. It,
That's
it,
right.
it doesn't just show up, there's work that has to get done and everybody has to know their part. And really the best design firms are those that can take the end users on the journey so that they do the work and then be rewarded for it on the back end.
And it is a journey, right? I mean, we say that all the time. We're just excited to go on this journey with you, but to our clients, but it really is a journey of discovery and, really finding out who they want to be. And I just love watching that play out in front of me from the minute, we get engaged to the moment they move in. It's an
Mhm.
unbelievable
And one of my
experience,
favorite
privilege.
things about that too is the surprise and delight that the employees feel when they walk in on that first day.
Yes,
Kind of the transformation that they get to be a part of. What a great way for a company to demonstrate we care about you, right? We have taken the time to really analyze ourselves, to decide what we want to do, to your point, who we want to be. If we're not that today, how can we get to where that is going to reflect who we want to be? It's just, I think it's a beautiful thing. And it is this, day in the life that these people now get to actually live. It's fun.
and I've seen employees just from anecdotally in companies I've worked for, and we move into new spaces, you see the employees up their game. It's as if they want to meet the promise that that new space can provide them.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing to
Yeah.
watch, sure.
That's the beauty of empowerment, right?
Right.
Space can impact all of these things that when they come together, back to shared responsibility. I mean, if somebody created this beautiful space for me, I'm empowered. I understand that this was made for me, and of course, I'm going to rise to the occasion because now there's this reciprocity of appreciation that is happening, right? And that's to your point from where we started this conversation. Space matters. Those are the things. Those are those intangibles that those that don't have a space don't realize they're missing.
That's right. So, got time for one question, and I really am interested in hearing kind of your thoughts on where we're headed. We touched on AI. I think we
Mhm.
know that's coming, but where are we headed from a design perspective in this country going forward here? That seems to be a very transitional time for us. So, where do you think? Where are we headed?
Yeah, the power of experience, the power of purpose, I think are really what are going to be two strong drivers for where we're headed here. We're seeing design in particular have to balance this desire for individual expression, right? There's this individualism that's happening, and that needs to be balanced and coupled with this unification of community, and those two things together are where I think it's going. We see a ton of amenity spaces throughout every industry. This is healthcare, education, workplace. All of them are these lifestyle amenity spaces are no longer just like cliche. They are meaningful spaces that, again, sort of the underpinnings of this individual expression and shared community it satisfies both of those desires, right? All through this experiential space driven by purpose. Like they're all super interconnected with one another. Purpose in particular, look at, you're talking earlier about attraction and retention. And I know my son is a freshman in college, and he and his friends are very vocal about where they will work and where they won't based on the values of a company. Right. And so, like, that's only going to continue. Similar to the flexibility pendulum over my career, I've seen sustainability kind of swing both directions. Current state, that is everywhere. Like having a sustainable ethos to the core of the company is, my opinion, going to be that's the entry going forward. Right. Like in many, many places. It'll take a while to get there. Again, usually starts on the coast and then it makes its way to the middle of the country. But we're seeing that. The DEI conversation is an interesting one as well. There are firms that are not winning their bids because they didn't have a strong enough position on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Right. And so that topic is a little, unsettled at the moment. But I think the core value of, if you think about what DEI is, I'll tie it right back to where we started. How do you feel like you belong if you're not included? How do you feel like you belong, right? If you don't have community with people that reflect who you are. Those two things do not add up, right? So the belonging is like this main driver that I think we're just gonna see that drive purpose and experience.
Michelle, thank you. I always enjoy our conversations. We are very proud to say we are a Kimball Select dealer. We are one of the largest Kimball Select dealers. We are proud of that. We are proud of our partnership. We lock arms with Kimball and absolutely go directly into the fray. And we can't think of a better partner. So thank you so much for
Oh,
the
thank
partnership.
you.
Thank you for taking the time and having this conversation. I think it's an important conversation. And I think more and more and more the design community is going to be a driver of what we are in the future as an industry, even more so than today. And so I was really looking forward to this conversation. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Back at you. We are equally proud and equally, excited to go drive belonging and great design together, right? So let's go do
Let's
it.
do it. Thank you.